We'll start with the one from Husker GI. And he just says, Trev Alberts? Which is really all that needs to be said. But we'll go to Mr. Drew, too, who added a little more to it. Trevor Alberts is leaving Nebraska. Why can't we have nice things? That is a great question. That is the question of the day, because that was the bombshell. Came out Wednesday morning, reported by Brent Zwerneman of the Houston Chronicle, that Trev Alberts had been identified as the top candidate for the Texas A&M AD job. And in Nebraska, it was, what? Wait, what? Trev Alberts, former Cornhuskers star, who spent his first AD stint at Nebraska Omaha and then came over to the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, would leave Nebraska to go to Texas A&M. Now, this is actually not the first time that's happened where a Nebraska AD has left for Texas A&M. The other one was Bill Byrne, but that was a different story. Bill Byrne had been there for 10 years. Trev Alberts has only been there for 3 years. And he's brought Matt Rule on board. It seemed like everything was going fine. They just gave him a big raise, and now he is off to Texas A&M. So why did this happen? Why did it happen now? I think that's the question that most of the folks in Nebraska are asking, most of the Nebraska fans, because this is a kind of core-shaking moment where you think everything's moving along swimmingly, and you feel like the football program finally moving in the right direction. The schedule's manageable this year. It looks like they can finally get back to a bowl game, and then this, boom, because this destabilizes things. And the question is, why did it happen now? And I think that was the thing, that there was so much surprise within the Nebraska athletic department that this was going on, that this was happening. And if you follow all the people who cover Nebraska, our great folks at Husker Online, Sean Callahan and Steve Sipple, that was their takeaway. Tom Chattel, longtime Nebraska reporter for the Omaha World Herald, he was same thing. Everybody he talked to, shocked. Mitch Sherman from The Athletic, same thing. Longtime Nebraska reporter. Everybody was stunned. And you just wonder, why would you do it now? Why would you not see out a little bit of Matt Rule, see what happens? Why jump to Texas A&M right now when they just hired a new football coach that you didn't hire? It doesn't make a ton of sense until you dig deeper into it. So let's dig deeper. And the story starts, as some do, with a Top Gun pilot. No, seriously, a Top Gun pilot. So Ted Carter, call sign Slapshot, because he was the captain of the U.S. Naval Academy hockey team, had a decorated career as a Navy pilot, flew F-4s, F-14s. F-14's the plane from the original Top Gun. F-A-18s, that's the plane from the second Top Gun. And he became, after retiring from the Navy as a vice admiral, he became the chancellor of the Nebraska university system. And so he was in charge of the system of Nebraska State University. So oversaw the Omaha campus, the Lincoln campus. So he and Trev Alberts worked together very closely. Trev Alberts loved Ted Carter. Well, Ted Carter last year decided to leave Nebraska to become the president at Ohio State. Now, here's the real circle of life moment. Ted Carter, as the president of Ohio State, finds out that Gene Smith, longtime Ohio State athletic director, is retiring. So he has to go find Gene Smith's replacement. Who does he hire? Ross Bjork from Texas A&M, opening the Texas A&M job. Now, that doesn't necessarily lead you to why Trev Alberts would leave Nebraska for Texas A&M now. But here's the thing. Ted Carter still hasn't been replaced within the Nebraska university system. The Board of Regents has had 7 months, and they have not found a president yet. That is not the greatest thing in the world. Plus, Ronnie Green, who is the Lincoln campus chancellor, he retired in 2023. So all of the leadership above Trev Alberts has left, and he's not entirely sure who his boss is going to be. Meanwhile, Texas A&M is offering lots of money, a little more stable situation. Nebraska right now is going through a massive stadium renovation. Texas A&M just did theirs. So it's a little bit different situation. Money, I don't think really was the issue here, because I think Nebraska could have paid Trev Alberts. And I think one of the things we've talked about over this with coaches, and I think it applies to ADs as well, if you're in the Big Ten of the SEC, especially at a place that has a lot of money, that is typically competitive in most sports. Nebraska is a little bit different with football, but I do think they're going to be competitive again. You don't have to go somewhere else for money. You're going to be able to get paid wherever you are. But if you feel like it's a better situation, if you feel like it's a more stable situation, then yeah, you may move on. And that's the thing. If you're Matt Rule and you're looking at this and you're going, okay, what I signed up for feels different now too. And now you got to decide, okay, how do I feel about this? Now, here's the thing. If Matt Rule gets Nebraska competitive, he's going to be beloved. He is going to be handsomely rewarded for it. So I don't think that's something you have to worry about too much right now, because I think how this season goes probably will determine how you feel about Matt Rule if you're a Nebraska fan. If he does really well, you're going to love him. And I imagine Nebraska will make sure it does everything within its power to keep him. If it doesn't go well, then you're probably going to be like, well, we'll try again later. So, but that's the thing. You see this with AD sometimes. I'll give you an example, and it goes back to Texas A&M actually. So when Texas A&M hired Scott Woodward away from Washington, Scott Woodward put a key man clause, what's called a key man clause in his contract, because the president at Texas A&M at the time was Michael Young, who had also been the guy who hired Woodward at Washington. And it basically said, if Michael Young leaves, it becomes very easy for Scott Woodward to leave. Now, Scott Woodward would end up leaving anyway for LSU, because that's where he's from. That's the job he always wanted. And so it made perfect sense. But had that happened, he had protected himself, making sure that his boss was going to be his boss. And if that situation changed, it made it easier for him to get out. So we got a lot in the chat. Chris Callahan says, it's a no-brainer. A&M's a much better program. This isn't the 90s anymore. Max says, laugh out loud, what has Texas A&M won ever? Dude is clearly a snake trying to further his career no matter who's in his way. Jared says, A&M is not a better program. Trevor's just super mad Nebraska hadn't hired a president yet. If it was Iowa State that offered, he would have left. I don't know about if it was Iowa State, but the A&M thing is interesting. And here's the other question. If you're A&M, why Trev Alberts? What about him was the part that said, okay, this is the guy? Now, you can say that the programs are in similar places where they have tons of money, they should be competitive, and they are not competitive to the degree they want to be. A&M has been more competitive than Nebraska over the last 10 years, but that doesn't mean it's where the Aggies want it to be. The Aggies would like to win national titles. They've never really been able to get over that hump. That's something that they want Trev Alberts to help with. You know, they want him to help them move one more step up, which for them, one more step up would be competitive in the SEC, making the 12 or 14 or however many team college football playoff. That is what they desire. Nebraska wants to get back to bowl eligibility. Then it wants to get back to being competitive in the Big Ten, being competitive for college football playoff berths. So essentially the same job in that respect. One thing that Trev Alberts has in his past that I think intrigued the people at Texas A&M is when he was at Nebraska Omaha, he moved them from Division II to Division I. Now, that was a pretty controversial process. They ended up dropping football. But I think the decision makers at A&M looked at it and said, okay, there's some stuff coming up in the world of college sports that are going to require a lot of hard choices. And having somebody who's had to make some of those, even at a smaller level, might be helpful. And that's the thing. If athletes are declared employees, if they wind up doing collective bargaining, if that sort of thing happens, athletic departments are going to have to dramatically restructure. There'll be a lot of fat cutting. You've heard the warnings about cutting sports. We'll get to that. There's a question about that later in Dear Andy that we'll talk about. But there will definitely have to be decisions made in terms of how you structure things, how you spend your money. And so having someone who did a transition like that could be helpful. So that is one reason why Trev Alberts was an attractive candidate for Texas A&M. So we'll find out. And we got the A&M and the Nebraska fans arguing in the chat. Look, you're basically in the same place right now. A&M is slightly bowl eligible. That's it. You're basically in the same place. One of you fired a coach 2 years ago. The other fired a coach last year. Basically in the same place. But it hurts because Trev Alberts was a Nebraska guy. He played for Nebraska. First round draft pick out of Nebraska. Played for Tom Osborne. That's where it really hurts. And so we'll see what happens next at Nebraska. Obviously, huge fan base, huge passion, lots of money. There'll be a lot of ADs who want that job. Unfortunately for the Cornhuskers, Trev Alberts, not one of those ADs because he is headed to Texas A&M. Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples On 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.